Hello students, we continue studying the 7th chapter of history and Imperial capital Vijayanagara. In this module we will study Vijayanagara, the capital and its physical environment, why were agricultural tracts incorporated within the fortified area, and the royal center in the Vijayanagara. First, Vijayanagara, the capital and its physical environment. Water resources. The most striking feature about the location of Vijayanagara is the natural basin formed by the river Tungabhadra, which flows in a northeasterly direction. A number of streams flow down to the river from this rocky place. In almost all cases, embankments were built along these streams to create reservoirs of varying sizes. Elaborate arrangements had to be made to store rainwater and conduct it to the city. The most important such tank was Kamalapuram tank. Water from this tank not only irrigated fields nearby, but was also conducted through a channel to the royal center. One of the most prominent waterworks to be seen among the ruins is the Hiriya Canal. Fortifications. Abdur Razzaq, an ambassador sent by the ruler of Persia, was greatly impressed by the fortifications and mentioned 7 lines of forts. These encircled not only the city but also its agricultural hinterland and forests. The outermost wall linked the hills surrounding the city. The massive masonry construction was slightly tapered. No mortar or cementing agent was employed anywhere in the construction. The stone blocks were wedge-shaped, which held them in place, and the inner portion of the walls was of earth packed with rubble. What was most significant about this fortification is that it enclosed agricultural tracts. Abdur Razzaq noted that between the first, second and the third walls there are cultivated fields, gardens and houses. Pace observed that from this first fort until you enter the city, there is a great distance with the fields, many gardens and 2 lakes. These statements have been corroborated by present-day archaeologists who have also found evidence of an agricultural tract between the sacred center and the urban core. Why were agricultural tracts incorporated within the fortified area? The objective of medieval sieges was to starve the defenders into submission. These sieges could last for several months and sometimes even years. Normally, rulers tried to be prepared for such situations by building large granaries within fortified areas. The rulers of Vijayanagara adopted a more expensive and elaborate strategy of protecting the agricultural belt itself. A second line of fortification went around the inner core of the urban complex, and a third line surrounded the royal center, within which each set of major buildings was surrounded by its own high walls. Roads in Vijayanagara Empire. The fort was entered through well-guarded gates which linked the city to the major roads. Archaeologists have studied roads within the city and those leading out from it. These routes have been identified by tracing paths through gateways as well as by finds of payments. Roads generally wound around through the valleys, avoiding rocky terrain. Some of the most important roads extended from temple gateways and were lined by bazaars. The urban core. There is relatively little archaeological evidence of the houses of ordinary people. Archaeologists have found fine Chinese porcelain in some areas, which suggests that these areas may have been occupied by rich traders. Tombs and mosques located here have distinctive functions, yet their architecture resembles that of the mandapas found in the temples of Hampi. The houses of ordinary people are thatched, but nonetheless well built and arranged according to occupations in long streets with many open places. Field surveys indicate that the entire area was dotted with numerous shrines and small temples, pointing to the prevalence of a variety of cults, perhaps supported by different communities. The surveys also indicate that wells, rainwater tanks, as well as temple tanks may have served as sources of water to the ordinary town dwellers. The Royal Center in Vijayanagara. The Royal Center was located in the southwestern part of the settlement. About 30 building complexes have been identified as palaces. These are relatively large structures that do not seem to have been associated with ritual functions. One difference between these structures and temples is that the temples were constructed entirely of masonry, while the secular buildings were made of perishable materials. One of the most distinctive structures in the area was the King's Palace, which is the largest of the enclosures, but it has not yielded definite evidence of being a royal residence. The King's Palace has two most impressive platforms, usually called the Audience Hall and the Mahanavami Dibba. The entire complex is surrounded by high double walls with a street running between them. The audience hall is a high platform with slots for wooden pillars at close and regular intervals. It had a staircase going up to the second floor. It is not very clear what the hall was used for. Mahanavami Dibba is a massive platform rising from a base of about 11,000 square feet to a height of 40 feet. There is evidence that it supported a wooden structure. The base of the platform is covered with the relief carvings. Rituals associated with the structure or the ceremonies performed in Mahanavami Dibba on the occasion of worship of the image, worship of the state horse, sacrifice of buffaloes and other animals, dances, wrestling matches, and processions of caparisoned horses, elephants, chariots, and soldiers. Ritual presentations before the king and his guests by the chief nayakas and subordinate kings mark the occasion. On the last day of the festival, the king inspected his army and the armies of the Nayagas in a ground ceremony in an open field. On this occasion, the Nayagas brought rich gifts for the king as well as the stipulated tribute. One of the most beautiful buildings in the royal centre is the Lotus Mahal, so named by British travellers in the 19th century. While the name is certainly romantic, historians are not quite sure what the building was used for. According to Mackenzie, this may have been a council chamber, a place where the king met his advisors. Another important building in the royal centre was the elephant stables. This building has 11 rooms and beautiful structures. This may have been used for keeping special elephants which were used for king's family. One of the most spectacular temples in the royal centre is the Hazara Rama temple. This was probably meant to be used only by the king and his family. The images in the central shrine are missing. However, sculptured panels on the walls have scenes from the Ramayana sculpted on the inner walls of the shrine. While many of these structures at Vijayanagara were destroyed when the city was sacked, traditions of building palatial structures were continued by the Nayagas. Many of these buildings have survived. Thank you.